Hello there. As you're coming in the webinar room, I want to welcome you. My name is Marche. I'm the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. Before we introduce our guest and get started, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. Well, we are thrilled to bring you today's educational event and a couple of housekeeping items for our attendees. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the chat box, and the presenter will answer those queries during or after the presentation today as appropriate. If you ask a question in the chat box, go ahead and leave your phone number as well. And if we can't get to your question during today's event, we'll make sure someone reaches out to you afterwards to make sure that that question gets addressed. We want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. Well, I'd love to introduce you to today's presenter. Eric Maldonado is the owner and founder of Aquila Wealth Advisors, LLC, in San Luis Obispo, California, established in 2017. Eric has over a decade of experience providing financial planning and investment advice. He is a fiduciary financial advisor and a fee-only financial advisor. That means Eric and his team work under a fiduciary standard of care, putting their clients' interests first, and their compensation method is the most transparent and objective method available. Eric earned his MBA master's degree in financial planning from Indiana Wesleyan University and his bachelor's degree in business administration finance from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. In addition, Eric has designations of certified financial planner practitioner and certified exit planning advisor. He has earned the certificate in blockchain and digital assets and is a member of the Digital Assets Council of Financial Professionals. And Eric, I'm hoping we have lots of small business small business owners and partners and people who are in that industry here today. We're really excited to hear what you have to say today. I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Marche, for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Eric Maldonado, owner of Aquila Wealth Advisors in San Luis Obispo, and I serve a lot of business owners, small business owners, and it's actually really a passion of mine to help people do well with their business, grow it, provide for their families, have the freedom that comes along with business ownership and entrepreneurialism, and using your passions and your skills to reach and help people. So this is something that really excites me, to be able to help business owners. So if you're on the call and you're a business owner or a future business owner, feel free to enter questions on the chat. We're going to be talking about inflation, profits, expenses, business concepts, some numbers. So if any of that is, it's normal to have questions and need some clarification. So please enter in on the chat, and we'll address them as we go, or even at the end there. So, inflation is kind of a hot topic right now. That's kind of why we did the title. We're seeing numbers come in every month, and it was like at 9% or something last month, 8.5% or something this month, and we're getting excited about it, even though 8.5% is still a super high number. Just for historical reference, inflation is about 3% a year, going back 80, 90 years plus in America. So if you're owning a restaurant or a business or a product company or a service You might be seeing your prices increase. And even if you don't own a business, I mean, we're seeing our prices rise at the pump, at the grocery store, living expenses. So it's just a really hot topic right now. And, we're all hoping that the Fed and the economy and the people in charge and just the country at large goes back to growth mode, normal inflation. Are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? It's like, who knows? But, when it comes down to our personal businesses and how we run them and how we handle our family, we have some control. That's one of the benefits of being a business owner. You can control how you run it, and you don't necessarily have to be, at the whims of what inflation is. Of course, it's going to, hurt when you see prices rise or you see material costs rise, but you can run your business in a way that it doesn't necessarily have to cause a whole lot of disruption. So we can go to the next slide, Marche.
Absolutely. And I do want to offer maybe some feedback to, as I know several small business owners, and that is inflation is one of the things on their mind, dealing with inflation as a consumer.
Yeah.
And also bringing in, goods and services for their business. Prices have risen. And then also having to maybe pass that on to customers and worried about losing customers.
Yes, as well as staff and hiring people. It's, retaining people and not having to hurt your employees either, because costs are rising. So if we get the cash flow right, which is what we're talking about here, it's a cash flow system where the process of how you separate your money within your business. I feel if you get that right, you're much less likely to run into some of those errors or mistakes or just regrets of having to make mistakes as it relates to your customers, your clients, or even your employees, or how you run your business. So this content in particular, I got from a book called Profit First. Some of you may have heard of it. Author is Mike Michalowicz. I'm a fan of his just his simplistic style on how he helps small business owners operate. I think a lot of times as business owners, we tend to have a skill or a craft or a service that we're good at, and not necessarily, and our skill set isn't necessarily bookkeeping, accounting, and financial organization. So I really like this process that he has called Profit First, where it's just separating out the main areas of your business into separate bank accounts. So here's an example. You want a profit account, you want an operations expense account, salary, taxes, and then you're also an account where all of your income flows in. And then you're able to have like a cash-based running of your business. Cash is often said as the lifeblood of a business. So if you know how your cash is coming in and through the business, it helps you make decisions. So we can go to the next slide, and it kind of breaks it down a little bit further.
All right, we did have a question come in, but I'm going to hold it because it doesn't quite apply yet, but I will ask it soon.
Awesome. Thanks for asking the question. We'll get to it. We'll get to all the questions before we end out here. Okay, so again, these are the 5 separate bank accounts that you can set up your business as. And some of you might be on the call asking, well, I thought this was inflation. Why are we talking about bank accounts? Well, because this all relates to how we handle whether or not we can afford certain things, whether or not our expenses are too high or too low. A lot of businesses, they run their business out of just maybe one account, or just they're relying on the bookkeeper to kind of tell them, if they have a bookkeeper, how the business is going. But most businesses business owners aren't looking at their profit and loss statement, their balance sheet, their cash flow statement, kind of those accounting statements that a lot of times are kind of backward looking anyways. So these bank accounts allow you to run your business, make decisions, and they're at that last point, change your behavior. So behaviorally, instead of looking at, say, one bank account in your business and say, okay, I have a lot of money in here, or I have a certain amount of money, I can make this decision and buy this material or this equipment that I need. So you buy it, but without knowing whether or not some of that money needs to go towards taxes, whether you have to pay quarterly estimates, or how much of that is going to be set aside for salaries or employee compensation. This allows you to compartmentalize. It's kind of like the old envelope system. Some people have heard of that, or cookie jar system, where maybe you've heard of an ancestor or someone, a grandparent, they put away their cash, they get all their cash of income, and then they put it in separate envelopes, a grocery envelope, going out, recreation. It's kind of a cash-based envelope system, but with bank accounts. I'm not advocating cash-based, actual paper dollars for your business. I'm just saying these are the type of accounts. And someone might say, well, that's a lot of accounts. Why am I going to set up so much business accounts? And that's actually a lot of the way that accountants tend to think of it as well, if they're not familiar with the profit first system. A lot of accountants or bookkeepers might say, well, we have the spreadsheet, we have the business reports, the cash flow statements and the balance sheets and the profit and losses. So why do we need to create all these extra accounts and create more, in their mind, might be more complexity? And my response is that it actually creates more simplicity, because you're looking at the money as it comes in, and we can understand very quickly as a business owner, do I have enough money in my operation expense bank account to buy this camera or to buy this, new stove for my restaurant? So whereas if you just look at a P&L report, it's oftentimes really hard to see, okay, do I have enough money here? Let me know. Should I not? And the accountant's kind of like, I don't know, I guess maybe let's look at your numbers. It's kind of a guessing game. And so again, here, these are the 5 accounts, and this gives you an example of percentages on how to allocate each one. It's going to be a little bit unique for each business, but we all have to pay taxes, for example, so everyone's going to need a tax account, and 15% is kind of a good starting point. And someone might say, well, I'm in California, my tax bracket. Well, this is 15% of your sales, of your top line sales. So if you have $100,000, you're going to put 15% of that 100,000 throughout the year in your tax account. So, maybe your tax bracket is more like 25, 30, 35, but that's net after you take out all your expenses. That's how much tax you pay on the net. This 15% is gross. So you'll have 15,000 in that example. If you're making 100 grand, you'll have 15,000 in your tax account, which, is about 30% of a $50,000 profit. So it's a higher percentage when you take out just, when you take into account the profit aspect of the business, which is what we actually pay tax on. When we pay taxes at the end of the year, they're taxing us on our income minus expenses. And that actually reminds me of, yeah, go ahead, Marche.
So we got a question about, so is this state and federal taxes? Do you need your accountant to actually help you figure out what your percentage needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, you could check with, you could even just look at your previous tax year and just say, what did I pay? And was it roughly 15% of my gross? You can just see on your tax return how much did you pay for taxes. And yes, you can ask your CPA for help and just say, what line item on my tax return shows how much I actually paid to the IRS or to state and federal. If you run your business as like a corporation, an S corp or a C corp, you're already paying as an employee, and you're the business owner. You're on payroll, so you're already paying payroll tax through that as you get paid a salary. So that in this case, the taxes would be more of your business profit expenses, your federal and state that you're paid. But if you're just a sole prop and you're not incorporated, maybe an LLC registered as a sole proprietor or a disregarded entity, then this would be 15% would be towards all your taxes, because it all is going to flow through to your personal tax return anyways, your schedule. You're a sole proprietor. It's all going to be on your main 1040 anyways. So that 15%, you would want to cover all the taxes that are due as a business owner. So if your only income is your business, you don't have other side businesses that are paying you a W-2 and taking out salary, taking out federal and social security, these taxes are going to be everything, your social security, your Medicare, your federal, your state. But I always encourage, if you have working with a CPA and meeting with them regularly, as opposed to meeting with the CPA if you're a business owner like in February or March or April. I'm a big advocate of meeting with them like in November, December, at the very least, when because the CPA is like that because they have a full year or 10 or 11 months to look at your business, and they can better kind of help you estimate and guess, make educated guesses on how much you owe. Versus if you meet with them in April, May, June, they only have a quarter or two. It's still helpful to meet quarterly, if you have that kind of relationship with your CPA, but almost no one is meeting with their CPA before the end of the year to actually do planning. Because once the year ends, you can't do anything proactive. It's all backwards looking for the most part. So you want to get in a rhythm with your CPA to meet, and they'll set you up with quarterly estimates. And as you're paying your quarterly estimates, you'll get closer and closer to knowing how much you owe at the end of the year. But most business owners don't even have a separate tax account anyways. So if you put 15% in there and you have 15K for taxes and your tax bill happens to be 17K, you have a $2,000 problem, not a $17,000 problem. Or if it's less and it's only 10,000, you have 5,000 left over. I don't know if anybody would really complain about that. You can take a trip, and then next time you can adjust these percentages. What else? Any kind of went through quite a bit there. Any questions on that, Marche, or like
Yeah, so if you can talk a little more about the income account. I think people didn't understand quite how that works.
So that would be the account where all of your sales go, all your revenue. That's where all of your invoices, that's a bank account where all of your invoices get sent. Most people, their income account is their everything account. That's where their income goes. That's where they're paying their credit card, business credit card. That's where they're paying payroll out of. That's where they're paying themselves out of. So the income account is more of a funnel, if you will. The money comes in, and then every month, once or twice a month, you're moving that money out to your profit, your owner's comp, your taxes, and your operations expenses. So someone might say, well, that's a lot of transfers to make. I do this with my own business. I get a little bit of it's kind of like almost a dopamine hit when you see your money transferring out, a little bit of a gamification. It feels good to see, wow, I'm growing my profit for myself. I'm growing my owner's comp. I'm putting money towards my operation expenses. I needed something this month that I wanted to buy. So it can be more of a beneficial thing as opposed to an annoying thing where you have to go in and make transfers. And you start to develop a bit of a rhythm if this isn't what you're used to. But that's the whole point of this system, is it makes you more attuned to what is happening in your business from a cash flow standpoint. If you find it annoying that you have to know where the cash is going and put it places, that's maybe a good sign that you need this because you want to know where your business is and maybe not necessarily rely on bookkeepers or CPAs or anybody to tell you whether or not your business is doing well. You want to be able to have the best knowledge of how your cash is going through your business better than anybody else as the business owner.
We had a couple questions here. Does it make accounting harder when you have 5 different accounts that you have to bring into your accounting software, or your accountant needs to, or bookkeeper needs to follow?
I mean, it'll add a little bit more transactions on your ledger for a bookkeeper, for example, but this doesn't affect your actual accounting as far as taxes go. These are transfers of cash in between your business. So you're never moving money out. So it doesn't really complicate the actual tax accounting because you're just moving money in between the business. You're simplifying how you see the cash in your business instead of organizing your business on one account and trying to remember where the money goes. You're putting it in places before you spend it. So from a bookkeeper's perspective, yeah, maybe there'll be more transfers happening as you move money out of your income account to the various accounts, but it doesn't actually complicate the actual taxes. You're not going to recognize more taxable events, in other words, by transferring money through your account.
Right. And then we had another question about the operating expenses account. So for example, if you want to buy a large piece of equipment that's going to take you, let's say, a year to save up for, it's that comes out of operating, or can you make a separate account for that? What is your recommendation there?
Yes, great question. That's actually the beauty of this process. Over time, I expect business owners to add accounts as appropriate. So this is kind of like the baseline starting point. Every business needs profit. Every business needs owner's comp. Every business needs tax to pay for and operation expenses. So if you know that there's a big expense coming in the next year or two, then you could set up a separate account and just call it, you can name it whatever, big piece of equipment account, 50K by 2025. And now you're creating a system to reach your goals in your business while you manage your finances. So that's why I'm saying this is the best way to address inflation, because as prices rise in your operation expense account, you're not going to be taking money from future big purchases because you have that in a separate account. You're not going to be surprised as much when prices rise because you're not going to be pillaging from other goals that you're going to have to make good on in 2 years. It feels good to spend the money today, but in 2 years when you need that equipment, it's not going to feel good. So it's a behavioral modification process where it creates some delayed gratification where you say, hey, the money's not in the operation expense account, I can't spend it. And oh, by the way, the money in that separate account for the big purchase of equipment, that's for that equipment. I'm not going to spend that either. So it helps you know when you need to kind of cinch down on your expenses sooner, as opposed to if it's in one just cash account, you don't know if you have a big expense in 2 years or not that you're saving for. So I am a proponent of more bank accounts is better. Now, someone might say, well, what about all the bank charges and service fees? I also am a proponent of finding banks, whether it's a local credit union or community bank, that doesn't charge you all kinds of knickknack fees and have you, maintain a minimum of $10,000 before they charge you $15 a month. Or there are bank accounts out there that I set my clients up with, banks out there that are more pro entrepreneur business owner, and are happy to have you put more money with their bank, because the businesses that have these accounts, I haven't done this study nationally or anything, but I would be willing to bet have more cash in their business overall than the ones that just have one bank account. And that's a different problem to have. If you start having a bunch of cash in your business, then we can talk about a different problem on how to use it, and we'll get to that here at the end. But I would much rather that problem than the other one. Great question.
All right, let's move on to talk about percentages.
Yeah, so again, this is an example of how you can actually manage your business and improve its profitability, improve its just efficiencies and how you spend money. So on the left here would be an example of maybe just how you're starting out. Maybe 3/4 of every dollar that comes in is just going to operate the business, pay for, whether it's staff or equipment, materials, just software, things that it takes to run the business. And only a small, tiny sliver is profit. Let me speak to profit a little bit, because that's kind of the whole basis of the Profit First plan. The idea is you take your profit out for yourself as a business owner first, and then whatever's left is your expenses to spend on the business. We're taught, for whatever reason, in accounting class or just in school, that you take out your expenses first and whatever's left over is your profit. And that is the whole issue with the normal program. If we're always taking expenses out first, then we're going to be the leftovers, the business owner. And the leftovers tend to not be as good as what gets taken out first. So we want to take out our profit first, and then whatever's left, you just have to run the business with. So it kind of forces you to be a little bit more creative, maybe have a little bit more, ingenuity or ideas in your business, because if the money's not there, you got to think of ways to figure it out, as opposed to just continually paying yourself less and giving yourself less profits. That's the business owner who's been working for 30 years. They're 70 years old. They've been working hard. They've been providing salaries for people, but they have really nothing to show for themselves, besides hoping to sell a business. And who knows if it sells at that time. We want to get it to where the business owners that I work with are building wealth for themselves, for their family personally, as well as their business. So then you can just have, a lifestyle that is more preferred. So in this example, maybe someone doesn't even have profit first. They don't. So just by starting and knowing, wow, I don't really know what percentage of what I make per year is going towards operations. If someone stopped me on the street and say, hey, what percentage of your business do you bring in? Do you pay yourself? I don't know. So this helps you know what you're paying yourself. And then on the right there, it actually gives you a target to hit. Well, you say, well, eventually I want to be paying myself 15% of what I bring in. I want to have as a profit draw for myself, not for my salary, which is separate. A salary is the work you're doing. Like if you were to hire yourself, if someone was to go out and hire you as CEO for your business, that they would pay you. That's what they would pay you a salary as. The profit is separate. That's a reward for taking the risk as a business owner. And that's what you were, have fun with, vacations, provide for your family's future, create passive income, invest. But the goal, it helps you every quarter change that percentage that you want to put towards profits. Maybe it starts at 1%, and then over time you just grow at 1% a quarter or 2% a year, whatever the amount is. As long as you feel like you're making progress, it adds to the momentum as a business owner. Because it's hard. Let's face it, it's hard being a business owner when you don't really have a backstop of an employer to catch you. You need to do everything. You need to find the people to pay you. You need to pay the people. And sometimes you don't really have someone to give you encouragement or motivation or say, good job. Well, this is a way to give you some hope and say, well, I'm growing my profits every quarter. It's slow and steady, but at least I'm making progress. And then same with owner's comp. And, this also might lead you towards a discussion around, do I have the right entity type? If I'm a sole proprietor now, should I maybe move towards an S Corp? That way I can take some of the money as a W-2, and then I can take some of it as a profit draw. And a profit draw, you don't pay Social Security and Medicare tax on. So it helps you with some of your entity selection if you're just starting out.
Very good. And I'm assuming you would talk to a CPA about that.
A financial planner who can help you, with the overall strategy. A CPA is also someone who can guide you a little bit on entity selection. Also, a lawyer is going to come at it more from litigation and protection standpoint. Which entity protects you best? An accountant is going to come at it more from an angle of, what's the cost to become a corporation versus how much you would save? Do you have enough profit yet? And then a financial planner is going to be more of the overall strategy and kind of plan for reaching your goals.
All right, thank you. We've already touched on a little bit about how expenses can't get out of control. Can you talk about, I guess, not raiding the cookie jar then?
Yeah, I mean, it's much harder to raid the cookie jar when you know what that money's for, because you just know next month you're going to have a bigger issue. You're kind of kicking the can down the road. It allows you to know sooner also if inflation is actually as bad as you're reading in the newspapers or in the media. Some businesses aren't being hit as hard for inflation, just depending on the materials they use. Maybe if you're in a software-based business and your expenses are what they are and they haven't been raising your software as a service much. But if you're spending on food or things like that, you're seeing your prices increase. So it does take some, I'm not going to say it's just impossible to pull from it now, but at least when you're doing something that is, cheating. You're cheating yourself by pulling money for something. Sometimes, hey, if you have to make payroll, you have to make payroll, and you need to take the money from somewhere. But at least you're aware. You're knowing that, hey, I need to fix something here.
All right. This is something that's not necessarily a profit first, but I know that we talked about this in our conversation. I'd love to, core capital concept. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I got this concept from a book called The Great Game of Business, an author named Jack Stack. And he has a whole process on how he runs his manufacturing company, kind of an open book style, and letting his employees know how the business is going. Open book in terms of open financial book. He lets people know how the profits are going if they're reaching their goals. But one of the things he implements and is an advocate of is called a core capital. He's not the only one. There's other people that advocate for this, of course. But it's this idea that you have a cash reserve in your business just in case things happen. Inflation rising, mistakes, people having to hire more people or raise wages on your staff. But it's the goal would be to start with, for example, would be to have 2 months worth of operating expenses. So let's say it takes, I'll just make up a number, $10,000 a month to operate your business. You want to get to the point where you have $20,000 just separate, not for any expenses, not for any future big purchases, not for paying yourself, not for salary, just a separate, so this would be an example. Someone asks, should you set up a separate account for a big piece of equipment you have coming down the road? This would be an example of a separate account you would want to set up. You can just call it core capital. You can call it, the vault. I think that's a profit first language. You can call it rainy day fund, cash reserve, stress valve, whatever you want to call to make it hit home to you on what the purpose is. But it really helps when things happen in the business that are unexpected, which that's almost like a, that goes without saying. Being a business owner is dealing with the unexpected. So, someone might say, well, how do you fund this? If I'm funding all of my other accounts percentages and it's all adding up to 100 on that pie chart, how do I put money in the core capital? Well, that's up to you. There's a couple ways. One way is you can just put a fixed dollar amount into the core capital first. Before you start allocating all your percentages, you just say, look, I'm going to put $1,000 into this core capital account until I get 20 grand. And then everything else just gets allocated percentage wise to it. Or if you want, you can actually allocate a percentage. You can say, well, I'll put 2% into the core capital, which would mean you would have to shrink the, one of the other accounts, probably your operation expense. If it's 75, you would take it down to 73, and now you have a 2% core capital. But the idea is to give yourself a backstop, a backdrop. I said before, as a business owner, there's no backstop. There's no one that's going to, rescue us and give us money or help us. But this is a way to do that. It's a way to create some systems to allow you to not have to, potentially make business ending decisions because you have to just make money today. It allows you to not have to cut corners when it comes to providing services or products, because you need capital now. People can tell a lot of times when they're dealing with a business owner that's more about the money than it is about serving them. And having a core capital account where you can say, no, I have this money set aside, I can pull from it. I don't need to be, frantic when I talk to people because I need to make money, or super stressed when you're dealing with your employees because you don't know how you're going to make payroll. And it also prevents you from having to, and I think the next slide talks about this, using debt or a line of credit, which there's people all across the board in terms of their opinion on a line of credit. A line of credit is essentially, like it sounds, a line of credit, a credit card. It's not an actual credit card, but a bank opens up a line of credit for you, for your business, and you're allowed to pull from it. And some people, they actually, no knock on anybody, but some people, they actually run their payroll this way. They use the line of credit to absorb the ups and downs. Maybe if someone has a lot of subcontract work or, it's seasonal work. And that's fine. But I just feel like most people, when they're dealing with debt and they see a loan with interest on it, it tends to just make us a little bit more stressed. It puts a little bit more pressure, causes us to have a little bit more, maybe higher heart rate or something like that. So I just feel like a core capital account where you have cash that you can ride out those fluctuations in business costs, whether it's for payroll or subcontract work or whatever, allows you to have just a more solid business because you're spending from cash that you saved, that you were able to figure out how to bring a solution to the market that people are paying you for, and you're not relying on loan or leverage. I mean, leverage is nice if you need it quickly, and some people, if you're like a real estate person, you live and die by leverage. That's like your big thing. Like you put 20% down, you own the property. And that's fine. That's just a different lifestyle to live of being levered up. And people say, well, I have the collateral of the home, so if I get in trouble, I'll just sell the home and it'll never be an issue. And that's a good point. There's some properties that never go down. We saw in 2008, 2009, that didn't really work out, but overall real estate, it's pretty solid. The house is going to be there. A business is a little bit different because it's not a house that's just going to stay there. It's, there's employees, there's market stuff that happens, the economy. So I try to help people get towards a healthy core capital. And because let's face it, who wants to put cash away for later? We want to spend it on equipment. We want to just reap the benefits of being a business owner and reward ourselves and spend. But this is the kind of the mature adult business owner decision is Put some cash away as opposed, and then the line of credit can still be there. I'm not like, a stickler with no line of credit. There's definitely a purpose for sometimes for having to have that, but let it be a backup to the backup. Let the core capital be your main backup. And then a line of credit, if it helps you sleep better at night, just knowing you have $50,000 you can pull from at 5% interest rate, you can still have that. And, that's an opinion, but that's where I just feel like that's a more solid structure as opposed to relying on debt.
Well, just a comment here, as you were talking about that, I can't think of any better example than what we've just experienced with COVID and all the disruptions that caused, and the businesses that had those backstops fared better, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I had a few business owners where they didn't need to go out and figure out how to get the PPP and the EIDL and all the programs that were available, which they needed to happen. So, and they kind of just didn't get touched in terms of, and these were like event-based business people or that really had to shut down stuff. So it was a real case study of reality, not just theory. Did this work? Was it something that actually allowed them to continue to grow, provide for their families, and not have to like wonder, am I gonna have to shut down the business this year?
Yeah.
Yeah, prime example.
Yeah. Let's talk about, what if you already have debt in your business? How do you allocate money?
Yes, running off the assumption that you would prefer to have no debt than debt, this would be the way to do it. Some people, I don't know, maybe there is a certain style of person that they just thrive off of the pressure of paying off debt. And so they need that to go make sales or, figure out how to innovate. But if you're someone who prefers to pay off the debt and not have it, and not have to deal with, credit cards or paying interest to the bank, then this is where you would actually use your profit account to start with. So in this example, paying off the debt would have priority over paying yourself a profit to then go and reward yourself. Because that's what the profit is for. The profit is to get a quarterly, maybe I didn't mention this, it's meant to be a quarterly draw from your business, just like the big S&P 500 companies pay, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Verizon, they pay a quarterly dividend to the people that own the stock. You're paying yourself a quarterly dividend for owning the stock that is your business. And that's meant to reward yourself, to enjoy the, the fruits of your labor. But if there's debt, I advocate towards just putting it all towards the debt, whether it's a credit card or a line of credit, or even, some business owners, there's no shame in it, it just happens, have tax debt they owe. They're on a payment plan to the government, to the IRS, because a lot of business owners, especially when they're first starting out, if they make a bunch of money in the second or third or fourth year, they didn't know they had to pay estimates. They didn't know that, maybe they didn't meet with their tax person in November, December. It was just kind of a big surprise. The tax person says, congratulations, you made 100 grand of profit, you owe 30K. And you're like, wait, where's the 30K?
Yeah, that does happen.
Yeah,
I know we have here on the slide, still pay yourself a little bit of profit,
yes.
even just a little sliver, even if you're paying off debt. Why is that important?
Yes, it sounds silly, but even if it's, hey, I can pay myself enough money to go get, a milkshake or a latte or a cheeseburger, whatever feels like a reward, because the emotional and the behavioral is way more important than, the actual technical or theory of running business. It's, do you feel like, tackling the day every day? And it's just sometimes feels a little bit too much of a grind if you're not giving yourself something to reward yourself. It's like nutrition, dieting. Like you're not going to be able to, cut out 365. You got to give yourself a cheat day for most people. So even if it's just a little sliver, 1%, a few dollars, $100, $10, $50, and make sure it's a reward. Don't just save it in your bank account. Use it on, a small, even if it's a Starbucks, a small splurge to give yourself just another reason to keep growing. Because that's one of the hardest parts about paying off debt. And that's why you may have heard of the debt snowball strategy. Dave Ramsey and other people talk about it, but it's the idea that you pay off the smallest credit card or the smallest loan first. That way you start to build momentum. You start feeling like you have success, as opposed to, paying off the one with the smallest interest rate, even though it's a bigger loan. even if the smallest interest rate is your smallest debt, you pay that off first. That way you feel a sense of accomplishment and you move on to the next. So paying yourself even a small sliver of a profit every quarter is that sense of accomplishment that allows you to keep slogging through the hard yards of paying down debt.
Yeah. All right, let's move to something that you were very passionate about, what we were talking about on the phone when we were preparing for this webinar today. I know that this is maybe one of the first things you wanted to start, but we decided to put it more at the end so that we can end on this.
Yeah, this is one of my passions, is just helping people provide for their families, grow their family, and just do good, do well by doing good. And I've just come across business owners, throughout my career that, you wouldn't know to look at the business. You think they're successful. They have, maybe all these locations, retail, brick and mortar buildings, but all of a sudden the business has to close, and the business owner is just kind of looking for a job, and they didn't have anything set up for their family. They didn't have like any real wealth built. And so that's what I try to advocate for, is people building personal wealth as well as business growth at the same time. I just don't feel like they have to be mutually exclusive. I don't feel like you have to only focus on the business. You may have heard words like, plow back into the business, reinvest, put it all back and just focus on the business. And I'm not saying that's not a bad thing to do. Some people, they're plowing back into the business and it's like, hey, I'm putting it all on, red at the roulette table. Not that it's actually gambling to own a business, because you're working hard, but it's just one way to earn. And I just feel like if you're running your business right and it's being profitable and it's earning, you don't necessarily have to put all the money back into the business in order for it to work, quote unquote. You can still, pay yourself a reasonable salary. You don't have to be working 100 hours a week for zero money to grow your business, for the rest of your life. You can pay yourself a reasonable salary, pay yourself a profit. You can fund, your retirement accounts. You can have your protection in place in case something happens to you, you get sick, or, something happens in your family now needs to be taken care of. You don't have to leave them destitute. You can provide for all of those personal wealth building structures while you build your business. And someone might say, well, my plan is to I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a serial entrepreneur even, and I want to reinvest it all. And then I'll just sell the business for millions down the road. And that'll be my personal wealth plan. And to that, I say, more power to you. That's people do it all the time. Those are the big businesses. I mean, we hear the story of Elon Musk, how he was almost bankrupt, went bankrupt. I mean, Bezos, how many times do we hear these huge business say that, like, I was down to my last dollar. I was working from, a coffee table, and I was gonna have to, go to jail because the IRS was coming after me or something. I don't know. I think those stories are sexy and they sound good, and the allure. Hey, in America, we have the opportunity to grow and to be successful and to be a part of the a strong economy that's moving, and part of that is starting businesses. But I just feel like you don't have to necessarily live life, especially if you have kids and you have a family. That's kind of why we did the family picture and talking about family, because granted, if you're in college, 18, 19, 20, young, and it's like you don't have a lot of expenses, you can live off nothing and just and bet it all on your business, then that makes more sense. But once you're to the point where you're mid-career, you have people to provide for, you have responsibilities, people are dependent upon you, I feel like you can still run the business in a way that allows you to build your personal wealth. And that way, if or when it does come time to transition to the business, to exit, to sell, it makes it that much easier, because you don't have to time it perfect, in the market where it's a seller's market, or you don't have to necessarily get this huge multiple to be able to just maintain your independence and dignity in retirement. And some business owners say, well, I want to work forever. This is my passion. And to that, I say, fantastic. I love that. I mean, I plan on working for a long time as well. But it's possible that something happens to someone, an illness, an unexpected, whatever. And, wouldn't it be nice to be able to say, okay, I'll just step aside and live off of, the wealth that I developed and built, whether it's through passive income, stock market based, capital markets, real estate, pensions, retirement accounts. And then you also have your protection in place, whether it's your disability. I don't sell insurance, but, meeting with a good insurance provider that provides those protections in case something happens to you.
So what I'm hearing here is that you should also be creating options for yourself on the side outside of your business, so that in case you get burned out, in case the market totally, shifts and your business is no longer viable, that you're not going to go, if the business goes belly up, your family, your personal finances don't have to. You might have to get another job or start another business.
Yeah. And even if it doesn't go belly up, a lot of business owners, they run their business their whole career, but then they never really, build stuff outside of the business. And they had a great lifestyle, but, maybe from age 70 beyond, it's like, it's going to be tougher.
So the cash flow isn't there anymore when you retire. So
I just a business owner should have the same kind of dignified lifestyle throughout life that an employee does. You're taking all the risk. An employee, if they're working for a good company, they're going to get healthcare. They're going to get, long-term disability, short-term disability. They're going to get a 401k. Maybe they're going to get stock options. But you took all the risk and started a business and you don't have any of that. So I just feel like you should get as much as a regular employee is getting for the risk you're taking. So you can do it. A lot of times it's just, you need to know that it's possible. And that's the whole point of paying yourself, an owner's compensation salary as well as a profit draw. Because basically from that owner's salary and that profit draw, you do that same profit first system, but for your own finances. You have a percentage that goes to operation expense, which would be your lifestyle expenditures. You have a percentage that goes to taxes. You can still pay personal tax. You have a percentage that goes towards, the future growth, retirement, building wealth, reaching your goals. So that's how those retirement accounts, or passive income investments get funded. And it's not necessarily hedging your bets like, wow, I don't know if this business is going to work, so I want to put money elsewhere. No, I still say you believe in your business, you wholeheartedly go for it and work hard, but you're just doing the right things while you are investing in your business. I'm not saying, start other businesses in case this one doesn't work out. Believe in your business to work, but also, provide for your family, whether it's college education or, retirement.
All right. Well, we do have one more slide about, okay, let's say you're starting your business or you're in the bootstrapping phase. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we wanted to put a slide just on the topic of starting a business. This is so unique, and personal finance is more personal than it is finance, I like to say. So, this would change a lot based on whether or not you're doing a software business, a manufacturing business, a service-based business, a restaurant. But this is one way to think about it is providing, just if you can, before you fully go into starting a business, is having a set amount aside saved for your personal expenses. So just being able to provide yourself personally. So let's say it costs $4,000 a month just to provide, a basic lifestyle, overhead, food, things like that, transportation. So maybe your goal is to say, I want to save 50 grand in just a separate bank account, cash. And that's once I get that 50 grand, that's when I'm going to make my leap into entrepreneurship or business ownership. And that way, at least you have a year before you have to start, paying yourself a real salary and real profit. I still think, as you start your business, you can pay yourself those little profit slivers, like I was talking about before, to give yourself a reward, but you don't have to necessarily make the business pay you like a market rate salary in the first year or two. It allows you to run the business the way you would want to, as opposed to having to, get paid right away and maybe do some shortcuts in how you would provide a service or a product. And someone might say, well, I don't even really have a choice. I just need to start the business. And if that's the case, then that's the case. You got to just get after it and start working. But if someone was, let's just say a professional services person and they're working at a firm, and they want to leave now, but they could stay for a year or two. Well, now you have a target to know when to make the leap when you have $50,000 or $100,000 in a bank account. And someone might say, well, I have, a 401k for retirement that has 100 grand in it. Should I use that? That's up to you on a personal decision of, do you feel like you want to take from money that would be used for retirement down the road to start your business? And, that's more of a just personal risk decision. Like I'm such an advocate of business ownership and the freedom it provides and the opportunity that is a potential something you might have to do to get you towards growing equity in your own business.
Even and someone that asks, even if it means if you're taking that extra hit on withdrawing that money early.
Yeah. You would never want to have to actually pay the penalty and the taxes if you don't have to. But if your business is opportunity is that viable, and you're going to make more money over time, and you're going to be able to fund even more to your retirement, then it's almost like, just for an example, if your 401k is returning 7, 8, 9, 10% a year, but if you start this business and you're going to double your income and you're going to have profits growing for 20% or more every year, it's a little bit of an easier decision. 7 or 8%, or 20% plus, and a better lifestyle, and I'm going to put money back in eventually. But that's obviously a hard thing to say. Hey, I'm going to be growing my business for 20 years for the rest of my life.
Right. And I guess you would obviously want to talk to a financial advisor if you're going to go that route, because that is a pretty hefty decision.
Yeah, it's a big decision. It's not for the faint of heart. But I do feel like people that have a desire to start a business and have the skills and maybe have some, it'd be harder to say, hey, I'm right out of high school and I want to start this business. Well, it's hard to know, but if you've been working in an industry for 10 years and you've obviously, got the goods to provide for people and people are paying you, and you just want to make the leap. Some people, I would never advocate for this, but some people it's like, hey, I have real estate, so I'll take I'll take some equity out. The best is cash. But when push comes to shove, sometimes you got to get creative. And I'm not advocating for loans to start a business or as a primary plan, but plenty of businesses, they do what they got to do. Incubation period, give it 5 years to work. This is more of a mindset like, hey, I'm gonna be in this for 5 years, as opposed to, well, we'll try for 6 months and see if it doesn't work. It's more like mentally preparing yourself, gearing up for a 5-year time frame. I would never expect anybody to have like a specific detailed 5-year plan, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone 5 years from now. But just mentally allowing yourself 5 years to make it work, it alleviates some of that pressure to have to get it done today, and it also gives you the perspective to be in it for the long haul. And there's all kinds of stats about how many businesses fail in the first year. Maybe half the businesses last 5 years. At least you're already mentally giving yourself a 5-year window to be above, to not be a part of that statistic of failing in the first 5 years or 3 years or 1 year.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and open up the floor to questions. I do have a couple that have come in, and then if anyone else has questions, go ahead and throw those in the chat. We're happy to address them. Okay, I think you already answered this one, but maybe if you could say it again. How often do you draw from your profit account, and do you withdraw all of it?
Yes, you draw quarterly. First of all, it's meant to be a quarterly withdrawal, so it's kind of a delayed gratification muscle you're flexing, where you get 4 draws a year. It's not meant to be monthly, because that's your salary. Your salary is monthly. That's your day-to-day expenses, or every 2 weeks you can pay yourself. But it's meant to be a quarterly, every 3 months on a quarterly rhythm. And then you could do it both ways. I think Mike McCallowitz, in his book, he says draw half of it and then leave half. But some people, I don't see an issue also with drawing all of it, especially if you have your 2-year core cash the goal isn't to have a bunch of cash in your business just to have it in there. The goal is to utilize it for, fun or the future, or, create an income. So you can definitely pull all the money every quarter as your profit draw.
Oops, gotta
Good
unmute
question.
myself there. All right, here's another question. With the different accounts coming from the income account, how many times do you allocate them into separate accounts?
So the book advocates for 2 times a month, like on the 10th and the 25th, for example. So on the 10th of every month, you go in and you do your transfers. Maybe you have your calculator with you, and if there's $10,000 in there, you say I have to pay 75% to my OpEx. I'll put 75,000 in there, or 7,500. So you can do it twice a month. A lot of times, that's helpful because maybe your payroll runs twice a month, or you have certain bills that come in that you need to have paid. So the 10th and the 25th, I think he advocates for, because if you have bills due on the 1st, you don't really want the transfer to happen on the 1st, because the 25th gives you some time, and then you do it on the 10th before the middle of the a lot of times the 1st and the 15th, the beginning and the middle is kind of where bills are due or payrolls due. So you try to shift it a little bit, that way you're in front of it.
All right. What about keeping some of these accounts at separate banks? I've heard about that.
Yeah. It's good to keep at least your core accounts at one bank. That way, when you make the transfers, it's immediate. That's the benefit of having it at one bank. That way you don't have to wonder, like, wow, is this 3 days old? Am I expecting a transfer in 3 days? Because sometimes at different banks, it takes 2-3 business days. If you transfer on a Friday, now you have to wait till Tuesday. So kind of the main banks at one, or the main accounts at one bank. But in the book Profit First, he actually does advocate for using a separate bank to put your profit account and your tax account. That way it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. It's a little bit less tempting to pull from it too soon. So, it sounds kind of redundant, but you do your transfers into your main bank, and then after the money's, there, then you transfer it out, and that's where you keep the bulk of the profit and the tax money until you have to actually pay taxes or do your profit draw. But to start with, if someone's just saying, like, how do I just start? To start with, just create a profit account. No one has them, just something that you're actually putting money for yourself, profit first. And maybe you start with 1% or 2%. And then that if you're looking for one action item to take, I'm a big fan of, the One Thing book. Just one thing from this hour you spent, if you're here with us for an hour, open up a profit account, label it profit, 2%, and then just start doing a transfer twice a month.
All right. Can you talk about seasonal businesses and how this might work for people that are, let's say your business is focused on weddings, which happen usually, spring to fall, summer, not necessarily in the winter. Can you talk about that, where all the money's coming in just at a certain time of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. This is even better for someone who's a seasonal, because it allows you to create kind of your own payroll of sorts, kind of like teachers. Some teachers are 10 pay versus 12 pay. If they're 10 pay, they only get paid 10 times a month, and then they got to figure out how to pay for those other 2 months versus
you
12.
mean 10 times a year? Okay, yeah.
10 times a year, 10 months out of the.
It'd be nice to be paid 10 times a month.
So versus 12 pay. So you're basically creating a 12 pay system for your business. And in those busy months, if it's in the summer, for example, you set aside more money into that salary account in those months. So instead of otherwise, you're going to have all this money in this expense account. I'm assuming your expenses are probably going to be less, in the months where you don't have the events to do. So maybe for June, July, August, you say, I'm going to have my salary account have 50% go into there. And then that becomes your money that you pay yourself for the rest of the year. Or you can create a separate account, kind of like the core capital, and just say, hey, this is my slow season income. And say, during those busy months of, the summer in this example, you're just going to put a few $1,000s first into that account every time you do your transfers. So this is a perfect system for that type of seasonal work because you can create your own income account.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions. And I do want to thank all of our participants for having been here. I want to thank Eric and the organizations that have made this webinar possible today. To our attendees, look for an email soon with a link to the replay of this event. And you're welcome to share that replay with your friends, family, fellow business owners. Maybe your partner in your business would be interested in this as well. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners is committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.